Hey there! Look at this picture. Who is that? That is Topaz. Let's be honest here. Back in 1.4, Jingliu was the better character to pull for. Topaz just didn't have any of our follow-up attack IPC buddies, so it was significantly easier to build around Jingliu. I think Lingsha and Topaz are very similar in this case. My impression of Lingsha is that she is a good character on release, and her value might continue to go up in the future. Anyways, let's talk about Lingsha's beta kit so far. Her overall skills plus playstyle, her compatibility with certain characters, her current competitors, and why I think she might get better as more characters come out. Lingsha is a versatile sustained character with a rabbit as her summon. Just pretend she copied her homework from Topaz and Numby. Lingsha's talent is her rabbit, and it does the following. It launches AoE follow-up attacks, it dispels 1 debuff from all allies, and it provides healing to all allies. In addition, the rabbit also has an emergency action. It is activated whenever an ally takes damage or consumes HP, if the current HP percent is less than or equal to 60%. Lingsha has a standard basic attack that regenerates a little bit of energy. Her skill does AoE damage, restores HP to all allies, and action advances her rabbit by 20%. Finally, her ult deals AoE damage, amplifies break damage taken by all enemies, restores HP to all allies, and action advances her rabbit by 100%. So what does all of this really mean for her playstyle? Long story short, Lingsha is all about managing her rabbit through how much SP you're willing to spend. The more SP you force feed her, the more effective she becomes. You can use her skill often, which will advance her rabbit, allowing it to take more actions. The cost being high SP usage. Alternatively, you can limit Lingsha's SP consumption and just rely on the rabbit. The drawback with this playstyle is that her rabbit has a base speed of 90 at the current beta version. With such a slow base speed, it won't attack as frequently nor as often without assistance from Lingsha or other external sources. On the bright side, you don't have to worry too much about your team getting one-shot because the rabbit has a built-in emergency action mechanic. Plus, her ult is also another form of emergency rabbit action. The point is, Lingsha has a somewhat flexible playstyle. If the battle requires more healing and you want to break enemies' toughness bars faster, then you can just up Lingsha's SP consumption. If the battle does not require much healing and your other team members need the SP, you can limit Lingsha and use her as a low SP usage sustain instead. So in a sense, Lingsha will never disappoint you. The more SP we stuff her with, the more rewards she'll give back. The less SP you're willing to spend on her, the less effective she becomes. The other abundance characters that we have do not have this attribute. For example, you can use Lorcha's skill every turn, but all we're getting back is a single target heal. The same applies to the likes of Lynx and Chi-Chi at home. Lingsha is different since her using her skill can result in her rabbits taking more actions, and every time her rabbit attacks, it's an AoE follow-up attack that will help reduce toughness bars. And after the attack, your team also gets an AoE heal and an AoE cleanse. That is a buy 1 gets 3 free. It's a good deal. So, she seems amazing at first glance. What's the catch? Are there any major issues and red flags? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes. My concern with Lingsha is, what if enemies don't have fire weakness? Normally, this isn't an issue with Firefly around, but what happens if Lingsha is on other teams? Technically, she will still have her other perks, but it sucks that she won't be functioning at 100% without enemies having fire weakness. If you're okay with that, then that's fine. The second issue that she might run into is her SP usage. I said this earlier, the more SP you're willing to give to your Lingsha, the better she is. The issue with that is that not every single team can afford to feed Lingsha a bunch of SP. Even on our best performing team, a Firefly team, SP can be an issue if your Firefly isn't E1. This can be a pain to deal with, especially if we try to pair her up with SP hungry damage dealers, such as Imagine Dragon. So Lingsha is going to be as dynamic and plug and play as someone like Aventurine. Moving on, because Lingsha does pretty much everything you want from a healer, she fits into any existing team. Quick reminder, fitting in a team does not mean best in slot for that specific team. Her best fit is going to be on weakness break teams, mainly Firefly's teams. The premium Firefly team right now is Ron May, Emotional Support Raccoon, and Gallagher. Harmony MC and Ron May are pretty much irreplaceable, so Lingsha is competing with Gallagher for the final spot. Lingsha pretty much provides everything that Gallagher provides on Firefly's team and more. Remember earlier when I briefly mentioned about Lingsha's SP usage? SP should not be an issue for Lingsha on this team, if and only if your Firefly is E1. With a Firefly that's E1, 90% of the time, I find that team with a surplus amount of SP. This is because E1 Firefly doesn't use any SP during her magical girl transformation form. And Ron May is one of the best SP batteries in the game, especially if you have her signature Lycone. So all of the surplus SP that this team generates can be force-fed into Lingsha to allow her rabbit to attack more often. But why and how exactly does the rabbit attacking more frequently actually help out this team? Well, every time the rabbit attacks, there are extra perks that comes with it. The healing and the cleansing is nice, but most importantly, the rabbit's attack are considered to be follow-up attacks with decent value of weakness break. And the whole point of a Firefly team is to weakness break enemies so she can deal massive amount of super break. While a single follow-up attack from her rabbit isn't that high in the grand scheme of things, how about 2 attacks from her rabbit? What about 3? How about 4? Also, let's not forget about Harmony's MC's ult that gives the entire team super break damage when attacking weakness broken enemies. This buff also applies to Lingsha's rabbit. In theory, the more times the rabbit and Lingsha attacks, the more often it can help trigger super break damage. Moving on, I do have to say this. If you have an E6 Gallagher and you're satisfied with his performance, then Lingsha might not be worth it. Lingsha is probably better than Gallagher. By how much? That will depend on the final numbers. But ignoring the numbers, Lingsha just provides more perks. The AoE cleansing, the higher healing frequency, emergency healing, and more frequent weakness break, just to name a few. Are you willing to stomach the cost of pulling for Lingsha when you already have a well-built Gallagher? Does your Firefly team really need that upgrade when Gallagher is already performing well enough on that team? Just think of it this way. Do you really need an iPhone 15 when you already have an iPhone 14? Let's move on to a different team where Gallagher isn't Lingsha's main competition, Acheron's team. Lingsha's main competition here is against preservation characters with Trend Lycone. What does Acheron want the most? The answer is Trick Snacks. The second best answer is most likely more stacks to activate her ult. The faster Acheron gets her stacks, the more she can ult, which means more damage per screenshot. Here is the main issue with Lingsha. She is not going to produce Acheron stacks as easily as someone like Aventurine. Lingsha needs to ult to produce a stack, while Aventurine with Trend Lycone just needs to stand there, look pretty, and get hit. Ignoring the rest of Lingsha's kit, just the convenience of Aventurine makes him a better choice for the Acheron team, if you want to maximize the number of ults Acheron can dish out. And let's not forget all the additional buff that Aventurine gives out. These crit related buffs are more beneficial to Acheron than Lingsha's break damage amplification. Also, It is important to note that players planning on pulling for Jiao Chill, he will make the trend Lycone pointless on Acheron teams, so keep that in mind. Alright, let's talk about Future Proof. What I'm about to say is slightly biased, somewhat speculations, and it's coping. It's definitely coping. Between however many generals we have left in Xianzhou and however many Stonehearts we have left, there is a solid chance that some of these characters will have follow-up attack in their kits. I think we can all agree on that. Following that logic, is it too crazy to think that Lingsha will surely benefit from some of these future characters? Going back to my Topaz comparison, Topaz got better when more follow-up attack characters came out. Dr. Ratio, Aventurine, Robin, just to name a few. So if history repeats itself, Lingsha should follow a similar path. But all of that is just speculation at the end of the day. As of right now, Lingsha has AoE follow-up attack, AoE healing, AoE cleanse, AoE toughness reduction, AoE break damage buff, and finally her rabbit's emergency action. All of that at E0. Just looking at all the endgame game modes that we have so far, many of these battles will have multiple enemies. Let's just look at Pure Fiction. Pure Fiction is a game mode that was made specifically to help us flex our AoE characters. Lingsha will fit in perfectly since everything she does is AoE. Other than Apocalyptic Shadow, I can't really think of any other battles that doesn't have multiple enemies, which having AoE is a nice plus. Now, it's probably not the smartest idea to get Lingsha in hopes of her being more valuable in the future. Hope for her if you like her currently. If in the future she synergizes well with the newer characters, that would just be a nice and pleasant surprise. Moving on to her Eidolons. This isn't me being a snake oil salesman. If you're throwing your Stellar Jades at her, get her E1. Everything else doesn't really matter. Her E1 increases weakness break efficiency by 50%, meaning all of her attacks and her rabbit's attacks will eat through enemies' toughness bars, and any weakness broken enemies will have their defense reduced by 20%, which is like getting hit by a weaker Pella ult. Her E2 boosts allies' break effects, which will benefit break teams the most, so it's a bit of a niche. Her E4 is an extra healing for your lowest HP ally after every rapid attack, which isn't bad in itself, but it's pretty meh, since it doesn't have much offensive capabilities. Her E6 is great, but most of us will need to eat instant ramen for 3 months to afford E6, so not really worth it unless Lingsha is your favorite character and you don't want any other characters for the foreseeable future. Overall, I think Lingsha is a solid character to have at the moment, but I'm not going to take out a loan for her. I am personally satisfied with my E6 Gallagher. I don't need Lingsha to help me clear anything. Will she perform better than my Gallagher? Most likely, but I don't think it's worth it for me to pull her E1 and her signature Lycone just to help me, clear MOC like a turn earlier? With that said, I'm still pulling for her. I have an addiction. I'll throw in 80 pulls at her banner and see where that takes me. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Are you gonna pull for her? Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.